Welcome to the Startup Passport by eConsulate. Today we're at the Upstream Festival and I'm joined by Sergio Panday. You're the co-founder and CEO of Roots Inspire. Thank you very much for joining, first of all. And could you tell a little bit about the company?
Yeah, thanks for having me. So I come from the banking industry myself, but I started Roots Inspire together with my co-founder bit more than 3 years ago. And it was really driven by, what happened with George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement, and just seeing that there's so much talent that gets stuck in the corporate world, leaves the corporate world. So black talent, ethnic talent. So what we're doing is talent management for ethnic professionals to make sure that there's more ethnic diversity in leadership, because there's so much talent out there, and there's a huge value to be unlocked there.
Does your motivation also come from your experience in banking at all?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I've always been the only person of color throughout my banking career, whether it was in the team or even when you move to a more senior level, even across almost entire business units. Whereas at the same time, there's so much mediocrity around you as well, right? So when you start out, you think like, oh, the more senior I'm going to get, the more I'm going to reach these leadership levels, the higher the pace, the higher the level of talent, of professionalism. Whereas actually, it's not always the case. I mean, they're great people also, right? But there's also a lot of mediocrity. And I think companies and industries can greatly benefit from better talent management systems, where actually the top talent reaches the top rather than just the talent that has, the network and the trust and that looks more like the current leaders. So yeah, that was the background.
And you have been working in the banking also in Singapore, right? But now you also have experience with working in Europe. So do you see any differences there in terms of diversity in leader positions between different continents? Because obviously you have the experience now.
Absolutely. So I'm born in the Caribbean. I was 2 when I moved to the Netherlands. So I grew up in the Netherlands. And I started my career in the Netherlands, first 10 years here, and then I moved to Singapore. So I spent 8 years in Singapore in banking. And I mean, every country, every continent has has different challenges when it comes to diversity, ethnic diversity. To me, I think a big lesson from moving abroad was that to get that outside in perspective. So to also look back at the Netherlands and corporate life there and see what's wrong or what could be better. But another big lesson for me was that actually black people in Singapore are, in my opinion, very well treated, right? And a lot of that has to do with there's not a lot of black people in Singapore, but those that are there are very successful expats, or they are tourists, and then tourists with money, because Singapore is an expensive country. So, and because people don't really watch the Western television, their whole reference of black people that they come across is very different. Now, that's not for all ethnicities, right? I think South Asian, Indian ethnicities have a much tougher time in Singapore. And I think that comes also because there's a lot of construction workers. So there's like social class and race and ethnicity are often very intertwined. And depending on what reference you have is also how you're gonna look at ethnicity and where sort of racist stuff comes from. So it also shows you a bit like how to battle this.
And then going forward, what do you think is a way also for Roots Inspire to be a force for a positive change in that sense? Especially in Europe, you have some countries, for example, Germany, or I think also the Netherlands, where it was politically discussed to have a certain percentage of leading positions to be set, in a sense that you can only have this amount of males, this amount of females, and maybe that's also something to include like different backgrounds in terms of nationalities, ethnicities in there. Do you think something like this can help, or is it also a risk that then it is just being said this person is only in this position because of their background or gender?
Well, it's a great question, because I think like on ethnicity, like to have targets, I think the UK is, is there actually already in some sectors, or at least if you're listed. I think in Europe they're far from that. To me, like that whole discussion is distracting. Right? Because I think what we need to focus on is why we need more diversity. It's not diversity because of diversity. It's diversity because it adds value and it creates better teams. Right? Then the question how to get there is a different question. So I am a believer in quotas to break through to systems that are not designed for diversity, right? So I think you do need to break through, but then to get to the other end where it becomes a more normal thing. And because people are so focused on these quotas, then it changes the discussion, and then it makes people believe that, oh, we're just doing diversity for diversity because we just need to meet the quota. And I think that's the downside of using quotas, right? So there's pros and cons, I think. But I think as long as you have that goal in mind, if you understand like, okay, this is where we want to be and why, I think you do need some brake irons to get there.
Yeah, I think it will be very interested to see how Roots Inspire can add to that and showing people what culture can essentially also add to a company. So thank you very much for sharing that, and good luck on your journey with the company.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.